there is a lot of different formatting that we're going to need to do for our output. Often we're going to need to round numbers. We're going to need to display numbers as money, include commas, include decimal points, include special characters, remove special characters. So we're going to walk through several of the things that you're going to need to do when you're formatting output. By default, when we're printing something, it automatically ends with a hidden character, a new line symbol. So if we're going to print 3 things, and I'm going to use commas, so they'd be 3 separate things. So I would print Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. By default, each of these has a /n hidden. It's a new line symbol. So it would print, your display output would be Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, all on separate lines. That's the way it works if you don't specifically modify it. To modify it, we can change the code. We can change this to add additional parameters. And so right now we're passing it our first parameter, the day of the week. It is optional to include end equals, and here I'm just going to put in a space, comma, end equals, and a space. Now we could do the same thing here, but since there's nothing coming after it, you won't see a difference. So if we do it that way, instead of having that hidden new line, that's been replaced with the end statement. It's been replaced with a space. So we would have a result of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. That's how to change your default display with the end. There's a lot of other things that we're going to do with formatting that you might actually use more commonly. I think that the thing that we use most is changing how numbers print, but we'll get to that in a minute. We also use escape sequences where we can add things like tabs or that new line to force a line break. So you can specify an item separator, like with the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, instead of the end, if you had them in one statement with commas between them. So if we did print sun, and I'm going to abbreviate, comma, mon, and this is again passing 3 separate things, not one concatenated statement. We can add to the end a different separator for it to print. So if we do sep instead of end, separator equals, so I'll put it down here, sep equals, we could put comma. It would have a comma between it. It would print Sunday, Monday, Tuesday with comma. You could put an asterisk. You could put anything you wanted. So if we put in a semicolon, it would print this way. You would get Sunday, semicolon, Monday, semicolon, Tuesday. Now, if you wanted it with a space, you'd have to have a semicolon and a space there. So if you're doing a long list, you can change your separators. And there are times when you may want to do that. You may want to display a list with commas and spaces or something like that. It's a common enough formatting option. You're also going to use escape characters. The ones that I use most commonly are the /n, that's adding a new line. We talked about that for the Mad Libs program. If you wanted to add an extra blank line, you could have /n. If you want multiple ones, you can have multiple /n's, and they're inside of a quote. You can also do a tab. Those are the 2 most common ones that I use. There are others. And if you look in your book, it tells you T is tab, a slash in it. Since we're using strings here, if we wanted a single quote, say you're trying to print something with a possessive or a contraction, If you want a single quote showing possession, you'd print instead of apostrophe S, you'd need the slash apostrophe. That would make it print. You could do the same thing for a backslash or a quote. If you wanted a backslash to print, you would have 2 slashes. That way 1 backslash would print. That would print 1 backslash, or you could do backslash and a quote, and that would actually print your quotes. If you wanted quotes in a output statement, you could do that. Those are your common escape characters that you will use really frequently. Often you're going to want things to print together. So we've talked about that we're sending different things to the print statement, and these work slightly differently. If we print sun, mun, etc., these each one with a comma between them, they're printing as different items. They automatically get spacing. If we combine them or concatenate them into one item, you want to make sure to leave a space, either at the end of everything or the beginning, be consistent. This adds them together and combines them into a single string. So this would actually look like sun space mun when it prints out. If you printed one after the other, you'd see that the spacing is a little different. This would be a single character. This is closer to 2 or 3 characters. These are 2 separate things being printed. This is one that's combined. That's concatenation. We're often going to need to do complicated formatting for numbers. Let's say that we have a very large dollar value. So we're going to say money equals 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.8912. Okay, this is not very readable. It is a valid number. That is a float. This is an unformatted number. When we display it, we're going to want to format it so it looks nice on screen. So we have different options when we're formatting it to add in commas and other things. So if we wanted to print money formatted, we would print, when we print it, we would print, and I would put the $sign here with a space or multiple spaces. And then you can either use a comma or a plus. And when you use this next function, it will automatically convert it to a string. So we're going to do the format function. So we're doing plus and then the word format. That is a keyword, a named function. And whenever we have a function, we pass variables into it. So we want to pass that money variable. So we're going to put in money, and we can pass more than one thing. The next thing we pass tells it how it's going to format. So if we want to cut it off to only have 2 decimal points here, we're going to do plus 0.2f. Floating point, 2 values to the right of the decimal point. If you want to include, we need to do this in single quotes for that to work, and close the parenthesis. If you want to include comma separators, you put a comma before the point. And you can also specify a minimum field width. This helps you create columns for results. So we could add here to the field width, we could add 10, 0.2f. This means it's going to be it has to be a minimum of 10 characters wide with a comma, a decimal point, and 2 characters at the end. So it would give you your decimal point, 7, 8, it cuts off, and then we would get a comma, and it would make sure it's a minimum of 10 characters going across. If it's larger, that's fine. That's setting your minimum. You will do this sort of formatting consistently throughout the class, and in the notes section at the top of the class, there's a little handout on formatting because you'll refer to it over and over again. If we wanted that to format, or if we wanted to format something as a percent, we could print format, and we could pass in a literal value, not a string, a literal number, 0.75, comma, and then we need to have our single quote and our percent sign, and that will format as a percent. And so those are the basic formatting things. I don't expect you to remember them all. Do know where to find them in the chapter, and look at the formatting handout at the top of the online class. It's useful to have printed out next to you when you're working with numbers. You'll be doing number formatting almost every chapter for the rest of the class.